The year was 1872, and the frontier stank of sweat, gunpowder, and fear. The sun bore down on the ramshackle town of Dry Creek, where the wind carried dust through crooked streets, and the clatter of boots never quite drowned the groans of a land stretched thin. Men came here for gold, whiskey, and women. Some left rich. Most left in pine boxes. But today, the talk of the town wasn't cattle or poker. It was the auction. The crowd gathered in a half-circle, their shadows long on the packed dirt. A rough plank platform had been erected outside the saloon, and upon it stood three Chinese women, wrists bound, ankles shackled. They were not dressed to entice, but to humiliate. Plain dresses dirted by travel, hair tangled from the weeks on the trail. The auctioneer, a sweaty man with red suspenders straining over his belly, barked to the crowd as though he were selling mules. Three fine imports, gentlemen, straight from the coast. Hard workers, quiet by nature, and worth every penny. You can't get stock like this without connections. His voice dripped with mockery, and the laughter of the men below rolled like thunder. One of the women, the eldest, held herself stiff, chin high despite the jeers. She looked no more than 30, though her dark eyes carried centuries. Beside her stood another, younger, face hard with anger, gaze defiant even as men shouted crude offers. The third was the smallest, barely more than a girl, trembling at the edge of the platform. She avoided every eye, her shoulders hunched as if she could fold herself into nothingness. The bids began. A bottle of whiskey, 2 mules, $50 cash. The crowd roared, and each jeer made the girl flinch harder. At the edge of the crowd, Jack Carver stood, jaw set, hat brim pulled low. He hadn't come for this. He'd come to town for supplies, flour, bullets, a new bridle if he could find one worth the asking price. But when the auctioneer dragged those women onto the stage, something in Jack's chest twisted. He'd seen plenty of ugliness since the war, enough to sour a man's soul, but watching them paraded like cattle stirred an old wound he thought long scarred over. "Step up, boys," the auctioneer goaded. "You don't want the railroad men buying them all up, do you? They know the value." The men around Jack shouted louder. One lifted his hand with a roll of bills, another offered a saddle and a horse. The bidding quickened, and with each offer, the eldest woman's face grew tighter, though she never lowered her chin. Jack spat in the dirt. He'd seen men trade lives before, seen boys march off to war under banners, sold on promises that turned to graves. The sight of it here, under the scorching sun, made his hand tighten around the brim of his hat. The auctioneer's eyes landed on him. "You there. You look like a man who knows quality. Care to bid?" The crowd turned, faces slick with sweat and malice. Jack lifted his gaze, steel gray eyes meeting the auctioneer's. "What's the going rate for a man's soul these days?" His voice was calm, but it carried. A ripple went through the crowd, half amusement, half challenge. The auctioneer chuckled. "Don't get holy on me, mister. These girls'll work a field, cook your meals, keep you warm through winter. That's worth a hell of a lot more than some scrap of conscience." Laughter broke out again, cruel and sharp. Jack's jaw clenched. He hadn't planned on this. But he heard the girl whimper, the youngest one, trembling as a drunk waved a coin purse and shouted something obscene. That sound sealed it. 200, Jack said. His voice cut through the din like a whip crack. The laughter died. Head swiveled. The drunk lowered his purse. The auctioneer blinked, then grinned wide. 200 for all three, or just the one? All three. The crowd erupted. Some cursed, some laughed in disbelief. "He's lost his damn mind," one shouted. Another spit near Jack's boots. "Wasting good money on China trash." Jack didn't move. His hand rested near the revolver at his hip, his gaze steady. The auctioneer licked his lips, eyes gleaming with greed. "Sold. 200 for all three." He slammed his hand on the post, sealing it. Jack counted out the bills, crisp greenbacks that had survived the war folded in his coat pocket. He tossed them to the auctioneer and mounted the platform. The women watched him, wary. He pulled a knife from his belt, sliced through their bindings. The eldest flinched but didn't move away. The second glared at him, distrust sharp in her eyes. The youngest trembled as the rope fell from her wrists, whispering something in a tongue Jack didn't understand. "Come on," he said, voice low, steady. "You're with me now." The crowd parted as he led them down. Men muttered, spat, some laughed, but none stepped forward. Not with Jack's hand resting near his colt. He guided the women to his wagon, loaded with sacks of flour and tools. They climbed in without a word, stiff-backed, silent. Jack mounted the driver's seat, snapped the reins, and rolled him out of town. The sun dipped low, bleeding red across the horizon. The wagon rattled down the trail, wheels creaking, horses snorting. Behind them, Dry Creek shrank into dust and shadow. They rode in silence for miles. Jack didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel the stares burning into his back, could almost hear the mutters following him. Fool, traitor, dead man walking. When the sky deepened to purple, he pulled the wagon off the trail near a stand of cottonwoods. He unhitched the horses, built a fire, and set a pot of beans to warm. The women sat apart, close together, their eyes never leaving him. Finally, the eldest spoke, her English halting but clear. "Why?" Jack glanced up. "Why what? Why by us?" He stirred the beans. Because no one else in that crowd gave a damn if you lived or died. The younger one, sharp-eyed, bitter, snorted. "You expect thanks? You think this makes you different?" Jack's eyes narrowed. "I don't expect anything." She looked away, muttering under her breath in Chinese. The eldest laid a hand on her arm, silencing her. The youngest said nothing, knees drawn to her chest, eyes wide and darting. Jack served them bowls of beans, setting them down without ceremony. They hesitated before eating, suspicion thick in the air. He ate from his own bowl, slow and steady, gaze on the fire. The night grew colder. Crickets sang in the grass. An owl hooted from the trees. Jack leaned against the wagon wheel, watching the flames. He could feel their fear, their mistrust. He didn't blame them. He hadn't earned anything yet. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Jack dozed, hand near his revolver, senses tuned to every snap of twig and rustle of leaves. It was near midnight when he heard it, a soft shuffle. He opened his eyes, hand tensing on the grip of his gun. The youngest stood near him, face pale in the firelight. She looked at him, lips trembling, then leaned closer. Her voice was barely a whisper, broken but urgent. "They come. Tonight. Men want blood." Jack's pulse quickened. "Who?" She shook her head, hair falling over her face. "From town. Many. Horses. Guns." He sat up straight, every nerve alive. The night seemed to hold its breath. Far off, faint as a memory, he thought he heard hooves. The girl's eyes pleaded with him. "Not safe. Not safe." Jack rose, scanning the dark. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, the trail back to town hidden in shadow. He knew she was right. Men like the ones at that auction didn't forgive humiliation. They wouldn't let him ride off with what they thought was theirs. He turned to the fire, kicked dirt over it, smothering the flames. The camp fell into darkness. The women stirred, confused, frightened, whispering among themselves. Jack strapped on his gun belt, every movement sharp, deliberate. "Pack what you can carry. We're leaving." The eldest stiffened. "Now, in the dark?" "Yes, unless you want to be dead before sunrise." The bitterness drained from the second woman's face, replaced by fear. The youngest clung to the eldest's arm, whispering fast in Chinese. Jack tightened the saddle straps on his horses, muscles coiled, mind racing. He'd thought buying them would be the end of it. Now he knew better. It was only the beginning. The distant thunder of hooves grew clearer, rolling across the night. The posse was coming. Jack glanced at the women. 3 strangers, their lives now bound to his by choice or by fate. He drew a slow breath, steadying himself. He'd fought men before. He'd bled in the mud at Shiloh, watched friends fall at Antietam. This would be no different. Except it was, because this time he wasn't just fighting for himself. He snapped the reins, guiding the wagon into the blackness of the trail. The wheels rumbled, horses strained, shadows swallowed them whole. Behind them, the hunters rode. and in the silence between hoofbeats, Jack Carver understood one thing clear as gunfire. He just started a war he never meant to fight. ChatGPT said, "The night swallowed them whole, wagon wheels creaking over rough trail, horses lathered with sweat." Jack's eyes scanned the darkness, every nerve taut. Behind him, the women huddled together, their whispers sharp and quick in a language he couldn't follow. He didn't need to understand the words. Fear sounded the same in any tongue. The thunder of hooves grew nearer, faint but steady. Men were on the trail. Jack urged the team forward, cutting off the main road into a dry wash choked with scrub and rock. The wagon lurched, one wheel striking a stone hard enough to jolt everyone inside. The eldest woman, May, caught the youngest before she fell, holding her close. Jack heard the girl whimper, but he couldn't risk slowing down. The wash twisted, narrow and treacherous, but it offered cover. Branches clawed at his shoulders as he leaned into the reins, guiding the horses blind through the dark. He prayed the posse behind them would miss the turn, ride past into the open desert. Then came the sound, lanterns flaring, shouts cutting through the night. They had followed. A gun cracked, the shot echoing like thunder. It splintered as the wagon side was struck. The women shrieked. Jack snapped the reins hard, driving the team faster. The horses lunged forward, breath loud and ragged. Another shot rang out, then another. Bullets sparked off stone, whining into the night. Jack jerked the reins, swerving the wagon into a narrow cleft in the canyon wall. The wheels screamed against rock, nearly tipping, but the passage swallowed them. Darkness wrapped tight as a coffin lid. The posse thundered past, hooves pounding above the canyon lip, their shouts growing fainter. Jack didn't breathe until silence pressed down again, broken only by the rasp of the horses and the women's hushed sobs. He guided the wagon deeper into the canyon, finally halting where the walls narrowed to a choke point. He climbed down, muscles tight, and listened. Nothing but the wind. For now. He checked the women. Lon glared at him, defiant even through her fear. May nodded once, stoic. The youngest clung to her sleeve, trembling. "We stay here till morning," Jack said. His voice was low, steady, but his gut churned. They weren't safe. Not yet. He unhitched the horses, gave them water, then set about building a small fire shielded by stone. The women watched him, their faces lit by the flicker of flame. Lon finally broke the silence, her English clipped but clear. "Why risk? You could leave us. Men want us, not you." Jack glanced up, eyes hard. "Men like that don't stop once they start. You think they'd let me walk away after humiliating them in front of half the town?" She said nothing, but her gaze lingered, sharp and searching. May laid a hand on her sister's arm. "He is right. Alone we die." Lon turned away, muttering in Chinese. May looked back at Jack, expression unreadable. He ladled out water, passed the tin cup, first to May, then to the others. They hesitated, as if expecting a trick, before drinking. Only when the youngest, Show, sipped did her trembling ease. Jack leaned back against the canyon wall, watching them. They weren't fragile, not really. He'd seen fragility before, boys crying for their mothers with gut wounds that wouldn't close. These women had iron under their skin. It showed in May's calm, in Lan's fury, even in Shio's haunted eyes. Survivors. But survival demanded more than stubbornness. It demanded trust, and trust came slow on the frontier. By dawn, the canyon air had cooled to a knife's edge. Jack roused the women, hitched the team, and steered them out. The land opened wide again, the desert stretching endless beneath a rising sun. He kept them off the main trail, cutting across arroyos and dry plains. By noon, heat shimmered off the sand, the horses faltering under the weight of the wagon. Jack's canteen was nearly empty. When he spotted a line of cottonwoods in the distance, hope stirred. Where there were trees, there was water. They reached a shallow river, swollen from spring rains. Jack dismounted, tested the current with a stick. Fast but passable. He turned to May. "We cross here." Her brow furrowed. "Danger." Jack nodded. "Safer than staying. Posse's still hunting." He guided the horses into the water, wagon wheels grinding against the riverbed. The current tugged hard, foam swirling around the axles. Shio clutched May's hand, knuckles white. Lon glared at the river as if daring it to take her. Halfway across, a wheel struck a hidden rock. The wagon lurched. Shio screamed, nearly pitched over the side. May pulled her back, but the jolt snapped the harness strap. One horse reared, screaming. The wagon tipped dangerously. "Hold on!" Jack shouted. He plunged into the river, boots dragging in the current. Cold water surged to his waist, then chest. He fought his way to the horse, grabbed the bridle, and wrestled it steady. Lon slipped, her hands clawing for the wagon's side. Jack saw her fall, saw her vanish beneath the churning water. He let go of the horse, Dove. The current slammed him against a rock, ripping the breath from his lungs. He kicked hard, eyes burning, and caught a glimpse of Lan's hair streaming like black silk beneath the surface. He lunged, arm hooking around her waist, dragging her upward. They broke the surface, both gasping. Lon fought him, half-drowned and wild. He hauled her toward the bank, every muscle screaming. May reached out, grasped her sister's arm, and together they pulled her ashore. Jack collapsed beside them, chest heaving. Lon coughed water, then shoved him weakly away. "I did not ask," she rasped. Jack sat up, wiping blood from his brow where a rock had split the skin. "Didn't need to." Her glare softened, just for a breath, before she turned away. May murmured to her in Chinese, soothing words. Shio watched Jack with wide eyes, whispering something he couldn't catch. By the time they'd steadied the horses and dragged the wagon free, the sun was high and merciless. But the women no longer looked at Jack with only suspicion. Something had shifted, fragile as a sapling in wind. They camped that night beneath a stand of mesquite. Jack cleaned his wound, stitched it clumsily with needle and thread. May knelt beside him, steady hands guiding his own, sewing the gash with quiet precision. He hissed through his teeth, but didn't pull away. "You fought before," she said softly, her English careful. "War," Jack answered. She nodded, eyes dark. "We know war too. Not same kind, but still war." Their gazes met, unspoken understanding passing between them. Survivors, both. Lon sat apart, arms crossed, though her eyes flicked toward them when she thought he wasn't looking. Shio hovered close to her sisters, but every so often her gaze lingered on Jack as if measuring something unseen. As the fire crackled, Jack finally asked, "Why were you in Dry Creek? Who brought you there?" Silence stretched. The women exchanged looks, a language all their own in the flicker of eyes and tilt of chins. At last May said, "We were sold. Promised work, not this." Her voice broke on the last word, though her face remained calm. Lon spat into the dirt, muttering bitterly. Jack's fist tightened. He'd guessed as much, but hearing it confirmed twisted his gut. Men had dragged them across the continent on lies, then stood them on a block like cattle. And he bought them, whether to save them or not, the truth was the same. He stared into the flames. "You're not slaves anymore." "Not while I'm breathing." Lan's laugh was sharp, cold. "Words." Jack met her glare. "Actions'll follow." She didn't reply, but her silence carried less venom than before. The night deepened. Coyotes yipped in the distance. Jack sat with his rifle across his knees, eyes on the darkness. The women slept close together, their breath steady. But sleep wouldn't come for him. He could feel it, the storm still chasing them, the weight of enemies gathering like thunderheads. When dawn broke, pale and cold, he roused them. The trail ahead would not wait. For 2 days, they pushed hard, moving deeper into the wilderness. The land grew rougher, mesas rising like fortresses, canyons yawning wide. The women learned to move quicker, to carry water, to mend tack. May's calm steadiness became a quiet anchor. Lon, though still sharp-tongued, began to take her share of burdens without complaint. Shio watched and mimicked, her steps growing surer. But the shadow of pursuit never lifted. Some nights they heard distant gunshots or saw dust plumes on the horizon. Jack knew the posse hadn't given up. Men like that didn't forget an insult. By the third evening, he found a narrow box canyon with high walls, a place hidden from the trail. He drove the wagon inside, concealed the entrance with brush. As the women settled, he climbed a boulder to scan the land. The sunset burned blood red across the sky, shadows stretching long. He spotted riders far off, 5, maybe 6, still hunting. Jack climbed down, face grim. He found May waiting, her gaze steady. "They follow still," she said, not a question. He nodded. "Won't stop till they've had what they think they're owed." Her jaw tightened. "Then we must be stronger." Jack studied her, then glanced at Lon, who was mending harness leather with fierce concentration, and Shio, who was feeding scraps to the horses with a shy smile. Stronger. Yes, they were. Stronger than he'd given them credit for. But strength alone wouldn't be enough. Not against what was coming. That night, as firelight painted their faces gold, Jack made a decision. "Tomorrow we push west. There's a cabin I know, half burnt, but with walls still standing. We hole up there. Make our stand." May's eyes flicked toward the others, then back to him. "And if we die?" Jack's voice was quiet, steady. "Then we die fighting. Together." The fire crackled. For the first time, Lan's gaze softened. Shio whispered a word. One Jack didn't understand, but May translated softly, "Family." Jack swallowed hard. He hadn't had a family since the war tore his apart. But here in the wilderness, with 3 strangers bound to him by fate, the words struck deep. And as the coyotes howled under the wide, merciless sky, Jack knew the coming fight would test more than his gun or his grit. It would test the very thing he thought he'd lost forever, the part of him still capable of hope. ChatGPT said, "The dawn came cold and gray, the kind that made a man feel older than his years." Jack rose from the hard ground with his rifle already in hand, his breath fogging in the thin air of the canyon. He had not slept much. Neither had the women. He could hear them shifting by the dying embers of the fire, whispering low in their own tongue. There was fear in their voices, but something else too, resolve. He saddled the horses, tightened the wagon straps, and studied the horizon. The riders were closer now. Dust trails had snaked across the distance the evening before, and he reckoned they'd be upon them within a day. He didn't need to tell the women. They knew. May's eyes had followed his every glance to the horizon, steady and unreadable. Lon had sharpened a kitchen knife against a rock until sparks flew, though her hands trembled when she thought no one saw. Shio clung to them both pale and silent, her small hands restless in her lap. By mid-morning they reached the cabin. It squatted at the edge of a dry ravine, roof half collapsed, walls scorched from some fire years ago. The windows were nothing but holes, the door hanging by a single hinge. But it was shelter, and more than that, it was a place they could make a stand. Jack halted the wagon. "This is it." Lon frowned. "This? It is broken." Jack swung down, scanning the ridgeline. "Doesn't matter. 4 walls, high ground, and one way in. We'll make do." They unloaded in silence. Jack set the women to work clearing brush and dragging timbers to block the lower windows. He patched the door, with boards pried from the wreck of the barn. May worked beside him without complaint, sweat streaking her temples. Lon muttered but obeyed, her knife always within reach. Shio gathered stones, her small arms straining, her eyes darting with each sound of the wind. By the time the sun bled orange across the land, the cabin looked less like a ruin and more like a fortress. A poor one, perhaps, but enough to slow men down. Inside, Jack spread his small stock of ammunition on the table, 30 rounds for the rifle, 18 for the Colt. He hated the sight of it. Too few. He slid the Colt into its holster, the rifle across his lap, and waited. The women sat close, silent. May broke it first. "You fought in war," she said quietly. Jack nodded. "Union Army." Her gaze lingered on him. "And you fight again now." Jack looked at her, the lines of his face stark in the lamplight. "Difference is, this time I know why." Lon scoffed, but there was no venom in it. Shio tilted her head, studying him with those wide, haunted eyes, as if measuring whether she believed him. The night stretched long. Coyotes called. The wind hissed through the broken walls. Jack dozed in the chair, rifle across his knees, until a sound split the dark. Hooves, many of them, rolling like thunder down the ravine. He rose at once. They're here. May touched Shio's hand. Lon gripped her knife, jaw tight. The posse rode and hard. 7 men, lanterns swinging, rifles across their saddles. Jack saw their shapes cut against the moonlight, heard their laughter echo off the canyon walls. Carver, one bellowed, "You in there? Hand over the girls, and maybe we let you live." Jack stepped into the doorway, rifle steady. "You want M, come take M." A pause, then coarse laughter. "Suit yourself. Kill him first, then drag the rest out." The first shots tore through the night, splintering wood, rattling glass. The women screamed. Jack dropped to a knee, returned fire. One rider pitched backward off his horse, lantern tumbling. Flames licked at the dust where it shattered, shadows leaping wild. The fight began in earnest. Gunfire cracked, sharp and merciless. Bullets punched through the patch door, thudded into the table, splintered the rafters. Jack fired, reloaded, fired again. Horses shrieked, men cursed. Then a crash, the door buckled, booted feet pounding inside. Jack swung the rifle and dropped the first man through, but another barreled in, tackling him to the ground. The rifle skidded across the floor. They grappled, fists striking, breath hot and rancid. The man's knife flashed. Jack caught his wrist, twisted, slammed his forehead into the man's nose. Blood spattered. The knife fell. Jack drove it home. Lan's scream rang out. Another man had burst through the window, dragging her by the hair. She slashed wildly with her small blade, cutting his cheek, but his hand closed around her throat. "Let her go!" Jack roared, charging. He seized the man's arm, yanked him back. May snatched a burning brand from the fire and struck the attacker's face. He shrieked, stumbling, and Jack finished him with a shot to the chest. Smoke thickened. The cabin groaned as fire caught the rafters. Out the back, Jack barked. He shoved the women toward the rear, covering them as bullets tore through the front wall. They scrambled into the night, breath ragged, firelight blazing behind. But the posse followed. 5 men still on their feet, circling like wolves. One raised a shotgun. Shio screamed a warning. Jack shoved May aside as the blast thundered. Heat seared his arm, but he spun, leveled his Colt, and fired. The man dropped. Lon seized the fallen shotgun, hefted it awkwardly. Her hands shook, but she braced, fired. The recoil nearly toppled her. Yet the blast struck true, knocking another rider from his saddle. The fight scattered across the ravine. Horses reared. Fire cast wild shadows, the air a storm of gunpowder and smoke. Jack fired until the Colt clicked empty, then swung it like a club. He felt bone crack beneath the blow, felt hot blood spray his cheek. May wielded a heavy branch, striking at a man who tried to drag Shio away. Jack turned, shot the bastard in the back with his last rifle round. The echo rolled long into the night, then silence fell, broken only by the crackle of flames. 3 men lay dead near the cabin, 2 more down in the dust. The last survivors fled into the darkness, curses trailing on the wind. Jack stood in the smoking ruin, chest heaving, gun empty, eyes searching for more shadows. But none came. It was over. The cabin burned behind them, flames clawing at the sky. Jack lowered his weapons, shoulders sagging. May knelt beside Shio, who sobbed against her chest. Lon dropped the shotgun, her hands raw and blistered, eyes wide with shock. Jack's gaze swept over them, and something in his chest tightened. They had fought harder than he expected. Not helpless, not fragile. Survivors, everyone. May met his eyes. There was no fear now, only a weary kind of gratitude. "We live," she said. Jack nodded. "For now." Lon spat in the dirt, though her voice trembled. "They will come again." "Maybe," Jack said. He holstered his empty Colt. "But they'll think twice. We showed them what it costs." They watched the fire consume the cabin until only embers glowed. Dawn touched the horizon, soft and pale, a new day creeping over the ravine. Jack saddled the horses, loaded what little they had left. The women climbed into the wagon, their faces streaked with ashen tears, but their eyes steady. As the sun rose, they rode west, away from the smoldering ruin, into the wide land beyond. Jack didn't look back. He felt the weight of every mile behind him, every choice that had brought him here. He had not asked for this fight, but he had chosen it all the same. The women sat close, silent, bound not by purchase anymore, but by blood spilled together. Lon leaned against her sister, eyes half closed. Shio's small hand rested near Jack's on the reins, her gaze curious, cautious, almost trusting. May sat tall, her presence calm as ever, but softer now when she looked at him. The land stretched wide, endless. The frontier was no place for mercy, but in the space between danger and dawn, Jack felt something stir. Not victory, not peace, but something near to redemption. And as the wagon rattled west, the wind carrying the smell of smoke and the promise of new trials, the narrator's voice might well have said, "The frontier was never kind, never gentle. It tested a man's strength and stripped him to his bones." Jack Carver had bought 3 women on a whim, or so it seemed. But what he truly bought was a second chance, one forged not in coin but in fire and blood. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe this: that survival is not just about guns or grit. It's about the choice to stand, to fight for someone besides yourself. That's the kind of choice that turns strangers into family. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because on the frontier, every voice, every story carries further than you think.